Thank you so much for the invitation. I would like to extend our warmest gratitude to PUC Minas and its partners for organizing this important event about the BRICS. We have been participating, organizing, and leading in several opportunities, open discussions about the BRICS with civil society, academia, throughout this year. We are currently preparing a report on our activities, and we'll be glad to share it with you in the coming weeks as soon as it's ready, and this activity will also be part of the report. Well, I'll do a statement on our presidency, and then in the end, I can make some comments, and we'll be open to further discuss with you any issues you might raise. Well, the BRICS has emerged as a transformative force in global governance, as we know, seeking to foster a more inclusive and representative international system, particularly within established financial institutions such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. At its first summit in Yekaterinburg in 2009, BRICS leaders committed to advance the reform of international financial institutions so as to reflect changes in the global economy, emphasizing that emerging and developing economies must have greater voice and representation in international financial institutions, whose heads and executives should be appointed through an open, transparent, and merit-based selection process. However, as we know, the slow pace of adaptation and resistance to change within these institutions have led the BRICS to adopt a dual approach. That means advocating for internal reforms while simultaneously establishing its own structures. These include, of course, the NDB, the New Development Bank, and the Contingent Reserve Arrangement, which respectively finance infrastructure and sustainable development projects and provide liquidity support to members during balance of payments, crisis, or short-term liquidity pressures. Over time, colleagues, this dual approach has enabled the BRICS to act across multiple areas, including trade, investments, and infrastructure. While the group operates within the existing multilateral system to make it more effective and representative, it also builds independent structures or complementary structures better to address the specific economic and financial needs of its member. By balancing engagement and innovation, BRICS try to ensure that emerging and developing economies not only have a voice in shaping rules, norms, and institutions, but also possess the tools to build resilience and self-reliance when traditional frameworks fall short. This is not without challenges. Well, those figures are from the beginning of the year. Representing 48% of the world's population, BRICS countries contribute 28% of global nominal GDP, 38% of global GDP PPP, and 26% of global trade. They also account for 25% of global FDI inflows, 24% of FDI outflows, and 62% of global oil production. Yet, intra-BRICS trade and investment remains modest compared to those among developed countries, while the financial needs for building essential infrastructure to meet the SDGs continue to escalate. Despite being financial and economic powerhouse, BRICS countries hold only 20% of IMF quotas and 17% of the IBRD voting power. In a world shaped by geopolitical tensions, trade protectionism, and environmental challenges, addressing these imbalances to foster effective and representative multilateral institutions and solutions is yet still more urgent than ever. In this context, in our view, the expansion of the BRICS offered a pivotal opportunity to reinforce the BRICS vision and influence in the international debates. BRICS work hard this year. We work to align its members' diverse interests and priorities through innovative and collaborative approaches so that we could amplify our impacts. Well, on our finance track this year, since the inaugural Leaders Summit, the BRICS, of course, has expanded its activities through multiple areas. And as we know, economic and financial cooperation are at the core of these initiatives. The finance track has been a fundamental pillar of this process. During the global crisis and subsequent IMF and World Bank reforms, coordination about finance ministers and central bank governance played a crucial role in driving limited but concrete results. That said, in 2010, the agreed IMF quota and governance reforms led to a 6% shift in quota shares towards EMDs, BRICS countries also coordinated efforts to support financial stability and liquidity mechanisms in global markets and substantially contributed to IMF's crisis response programs, becoming important creditors through the new arrangements to borrow, bilateral borrowing agreements, and the Poverty Reduction and Growth Trust. In 2014, under Brazil's chairmanship, some of the group's most significant achievements were initiated, including the NDB and the CRA. So the Brazilian presidency sought to adapt this evolving institutional landscape and focus on 6 key priorities. And I'll mention them to you right now. The first one is to facilitate trade and investments among BRICS, exploring payment system innovations and working towards financial market interoperability among its members to strengthen productive chains and capital flows to BRICS countries. One of the main important outcomes of our presidency in this regard was the establishment of the BRICS Reinsurance Task Force to further explore ways to enhance our insurance capacity. And also we shared an important report by the Russian presidency, previous presidency, on cross-border settlement and depository infrastructure. Another topic that was addressed was that the central banks conducted a survey and finalized with a technical report on cross-border payment system. The survey gathered views on the strategic and operational dimensions relative to potential alternatives for different future payment systems. While the report does not propose any specific system, it identified areas of convergence that could guide future steps. On the global economy, we engaged on several discussions on trade, finance, investment issues, and of course, the unilateral measures, the protectionism, the rise in competition and conflict between the countries were the centers of our discussions. Part of them were done with strong participation of civil society and in debates that were made public. Another topic was our attempts for a coordinated and pragmatic approach to global governance reforms. We have held meetings between IMF directors, between World Bank, BRICS directors, enhancing the needs to improve our coordination and to push forward for governance reforms that also take into account regional and gender representation in diverse levels. Of course, we emphasize the growing role of the NDB, including its membership. We recently have had new members in the NDB, isn't it? Uzbekistan, Colombia, and so the bank, as we know, has a different membership from the group, isn't it? The bank, for example, have Bangladesh, Uruguay, countries that are not part of the BRICS countries. So it has been showing a tremendous development, and we held a very important meeting in Rio de Janeiro in parallel to our ministerial meeting in July. We had the 10th anniversary meeting of the new development bank, which has had recently the re-election of President Dilma Rousseff, who chaired our successful meetings in July in Brazil. On IMF governance reform, we were able to find consensus between the old BRICS members and the new BRICS members for an IMF governance, a BRICS Rio de Janeiro vision for IMF quote and governance reform. It is an important document that has been trying to move forward the IMF reforms. As we know, they have been quite paralyzed in the recent years due to tremendous difficulties in addressing issues related to quota formula, to distribution of power, and to several other topics that during the 2010s, we had more consensus. We have strong US backing for those reforms. The situation now is quite differently. The world is in a more fragmented and conflicted situation than it used to be 15 years ago. Well, also the CRA, central bank-led discussions, the finalization of the review of the CRA is under consideration. I understand we're still going to have one final meeting this year. And finally, this review started some years ago. Okay, colleagues, those processes are not easy. International negotiations, they take time. First, you have to agree on the objectives, then on the operational procedures, then you have to go back internally and do internal consultations to move things forward. Those things are not easy, but Brazil is keen to finalize the reform until the end of the year, and perhaps it will be formalized, it could be formalized during the upcoming Indian presidency. Well, we also discussed in advancing climate finance through strategic guarantee instruments. As you know, as you probably know, the Brazilian presidency proposed the BRICS multilateral guarantee mechanism and linked to the NDB, to the New Development Bank, to de-risk investments and attract private, international, and local capital for BRICS projects. This is now under consideration within the NDB. Okay, it's not under discussion within the BRICS finance ministers and central bank governors. It has been moved to where it will belong in case it's successful, which is the NDB directors, the NDB board. And well, we also discussed having in mind the COP30, but also the importance of BRICS countries in terms of climate financing, convergences of sustainable finance instruments, and interoperability of carbon markets and taxonomy harmonization. Those discussions are very contemporary, if I may say like this. In COP30, in the next 2 weeks, there will be strong discussions in this regard. Of course, countries, those are new frontier instruments in the climate finance area. Countries have divergent perspectives, but we are confident that willing countries will be able to find common ground and advance on those topics. We also had climate-related financial risks discussion. This is also a contemporary topic, and you have to understand better the impacts of climate events, extreme weather events on financial conditions of banks, of insurers. For example, in Brazil, we had the case of the floodings in the southern state of Rio Grande do Sul. What were those impacts in the insurance areas, in the banking area, and of course, in the local governance finances? This was also discussed within our presidency. We agreed as BRICS in a climate finance leaders declaration in July. Okay, there was strong participation by the ministers of finance on those discussions, and it is an important document, and it's open for consultation that also had the intention to pave the way for COP30 arrangements. Please let me know if I am advancing on time. Okay, you can let me know here if how much time do I have, because I have some other contributions to make here. Is it all right for the moment, Daniela?
It's all right, Antonio.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So we also have, you know, that the BRICS finance track has this task force on public-private partnerships and infrastructure, and the discussions prioritize the foreign exchange risk mitigations, and we discuss how to create mechanisms to support resilient infrastructure preparation. This was a continuation of a work we had done in the Brazilian G20 presidency. We have within the Ministry of Finance the Ecological Transformation Plan, EcoInvest, and a number of initiatives that draws upon discussions on exchange risk mitigation and other aspects related to climate financing, in particular climate resilient infrastructure. We also held important discussions on the topic of international tax and custom cooperation. We approved, not only in the G20, but also in the BRICS, a landmark declaration in favor or in support of the UN tax convention negotiations. Next week, we're going to have discussions in Nairobi to be the second big round of UN negotiations on a tax convention. Brazil is firmly committed to this. Brazil is strongly committed to progressive taxation, to use taxation as a means to fight inequality and support more equitable and prosper economies. Of course, tax sovereignty is a highly praised attribute of countries. However, we are able to approve multilateral declarations not only in the G20 but also in the BRICS that consider, for example, the role of ultra high net worth individuals in trying to evade minimum levels of taxation. And in this regard, the need for international cooperation is unequivocal. Federal Revenue Authority, a Receita Federal do Brasil, also has its track on the BRICS, and they held meetings in Manaus in September, and they move forward towards progress in signing the customs mutual assistance agreements and the mutual recognition agreement on authorized economic cooperation. Those are operational agreements, administrative agreements that help to foster trade, especially trade between the BRICS countries. And the BRICS have a long-standing tradition of cooperation between tax authorities, and we innovated as Brazilian presidency, bringing those aspects related to taxation and inequality, the UN Convention, some works that are not specifically administrative or operational, but rather more political between countries. There were also discussions on artificial intelligence, its application in domestic financial systems, as well as enhancing data protection capabilities through advances in financial network cybersecurity. Finally, as a huge building block of our presidency was the promotion of dialogues within think tanks and civil society, including through the BRICS Think Tank Finance Network. So, as I mentioned, we are going to issue a report in the end of the year on our activities with civil society and academia. There were many. In May, in the University of Brasilia, for example, we organized an important seminar called BRICS Transformative Force, bringing participants from different regions of the world. But one important topic to highlight is the BRICS Think Tank Network for Finance that was initiated. Okay, it has been negotiated through different years. As you know, we have the BRICS Think Tank Council, okay, coordinated by external relation ministries. So the finance track has developed this BRICS Think Tank Network for Finance, which in Brazil is led by IPEA, which is a think tank associated with the Ministry of Planning, which is responsible for a number of studies and analysis, has an excellent public servants over there, researchers, and so they are finalizing their first report. Their report will be published in December, and it has two main principal topics. One is assessment of credit rating agencies, credit rating in general, and the second one is related to climate financing. So those were the main deliverables of our presidency. We had the ministerial communique, we had the tax communique, we had the IMF vision, the BRICS IMF vision communique, and the climate finance communique. So we had 4 major communiques. Let me highlight that in Rio de Janeiro in July, we had the presence of the ministers of China, Minister of Russia, Minister of India, okay, Ms. Nirmala, Ms. Anton Silvanov from Russia, Nirmala from India, Silvanov from Russia, Mr. Lan from China. We had the distinguished minister from the United Arab Emirates. We had the minister from Egypt with a strong participation. We had the vice minister from South Africa, Duncan, who is the coordinator of the G20 finance track. So it's a very, very, very important. It was also a very, very important presence. Also, we had the Vice Minister of Indonesia, also who is a very important young official from Indonesia. And we also have high-level representatives from Ethiopia. Iran was in the middle of immediately after the conflicts in the Middle East, so the situation was more difficult. But Iran also managed to send high-level officials, both from the central bank and from the Ministry of Finance, to take part in our meetings. So one final round of comments here. Now more open discussion here. Colleagues, the BRICS, as you know, it's not an homogeneous bloc, okay? It's not a unified bloc. It has not a secretary. It doesn't have an institutional strong bindings between the countries. I mean, next year, India can develop. Of course, India has the legacy of the Rio de Janeiro Declaration, as we had the legacies of Kazan Declaration, and it's very important to be politically committed to what your leaders and your finance ministers and central bank agrees. However, the presidency has more independence, has more leeway than, for example, in other groupings that have a secretariat, that have more stronger and regular bonds. The BRICS countries have tremendous differences between each other. For example, China is much larger than the other countries in terms of economic power. Just to mention one single and striking example. Those countries have different geopolitical circumstances. As we know, Russia is into a conflict with Ukraine, supported by Western powers. China has major competition with other countries. India also has issues. Brazil has its own geopolitical circumstance. United Arab Emirates and Iran is of course, in geopolitical circumstances that are quite singular. Ethiopia is restructuring its external debt. Okay, Ethiopia is within the common framework. Egypt has been, for quite a long time, making use of IMF lending to support its external financing position. Indonesia is a newcomer to the BRICS. This is also important to highlight, okay? The new countries, the real BRICS countries, it takes time, okay, for you to get used to what is at the table, and also to develop stronger in-person contacts and to know each other, the delegates, the officials. So we also have had this challenge during our presidency. You had the old members and you have the new members to integrate. And Brazil had this better integration of the BRICS country as a priority. I think we succeeded it in terms of, if you see the level of representation we had in July in Rio, and the level of the agreement, the number of agreements and commitments we managed to approve, they were very important. Of course, we benefited a lot for having chaired the year before the G20. So we already had good contacts with our colleagues from Russia, from India, from China, South Africa, UAE, lots of countries. Our teams were very experienced and technically very competent. They knew already all of the topics, all of the affairs that were under discussions. The cooperation of the central bank was already established since the G20. Of course, as you can imagine, central banks and Minister of Finance, this is also a challenging aspect. Many times, they have different views, they have different perspectives, they have different priorities. Sometimes they agree in objective, but one wants to move faster, the other is more conservative, is more prudent. This is also a matter you have to pay attention. It's not only you have 10, 11 countries if you count Saudi Arabia. Let me mention that Saudi Arabia hasn't engaged in the finance track this year. They haven't taken a decision whether to join or not the finance track. But you not only have to coordinate with 9, 10 countries, but you also have to coordinate between central banks and ministries of finance. And this is not a detail. This is also an important issue. It's hard to think about the BRICS as a bloc operating in Latin America, as an homogeneous or having a common strategies towards Latin America. First, as we know, Latin America is distant from the other BRICS countries, isn't it? Brazil is the most distant BRICS country from all other ones. That's why, for example, let me add, we made a meeting, an in-person meeting of the Infrastructure Task Force in May in Abu Dhabi, in the UAE. We made it because we wanted to facilitate in-person participation, and we thought, of course, with the cooperation and support of the UAE government, that holding it in Abu Dhabi would be a good way to guarantee, to make sure that we will have colleagues from India, colleagues from Iran, colleagues from Russia, as we had. So Latin America is distant. The BRICS is not an homogeneous bloc. Latin America is distant, irrespective of that. Of course, as previous panelists have spoken, relations are getting stronger. China is the largest trading partners of many of the countries. It's a big investor. We also have growing relations with Russia, with India, Indonesia, UAE, of course, South Africa. Of course, those relations also have tremendous impact by the stage of the global economy, isn't it? During the pandemics, significant change were observed in those relations. The big problem, in my view, colleagues, is the general decline in multilateralism and cooperation among the world. I think this is the biggest challenge. I think interests and economic opportunities and political interests, we have them on the table. But the fact is that the global situation is getting worse. We have to be realistic. We have a growing scenario of competition and conflict. Our minister, Fernando Haddad, he likes to mention about the polycrisis. That means the environmental, social, economic, and technological gaps. They are growing. Those crises, they are compounding crises. One feeds into the other. Pandemics, let me add. Also, we were just having this morning the meeting between finance and health ministers of the G20. So there are severe risks of pandemics ahead, and the structures of the WHO and the financing and health arrangements are also under strain, are also under attack by important players in the international arena. So the broad scenario of unilateral measures, of sanctions, of conflicts in Africa, in Asia, Russia and Ukraine conflict that involves Europe and other countries. So the situation is challenging, and Brazil, as a responsible country, a prudent country, a country that is traditionally engaged in multilateralism, a strong proponent of dialogue and cooperation, who had successful presidencies of the G20, of the BRICS, who is strongly engaged in tax conventions, in the health discussions and other. Brazil tried as much as possible to frame the BRICS not only into a cooperation mechanism for alternative structures, for stronger economic growth and investments, but also as a pillar of defense of multilateralism. That's why we invested time and energy and political capital to approve declarations on IMF governance, on the UN Taxation Convention, on climate financing. That's why we tried as much as possible to build projects, cooperation projects that are open for other countries also, just the way the NDB, the New Development Bank, is. I think this is an important feature of our presidency that we must highlight. The BRICS as one of the initiatives, a strong initiative of countries committed to upholding multilateralism, to upholding peace, dialogue, and cooperation in those challenging times in which we are, when ODA levels, official development levels, are declining fast, isn't it? And defense spending, and by defense we know that defense means military spending, in most of the case, is rising fast all over the world. So even in countries that in the past decades have refrained from building strong military capabilities, they are now doing this at the same time. And this is very complex scenario. This can have similarities with other periods in the 20th century. So we must be careful. We must be paying attention to those developments. And we, as Brazil, we are strongly committed to upholding the principle of respect to international law, to multilateralism, to peace and cooperation that enshrine in the United Nations Charter, which Brazil fully subscribes. So thank you, colleagues. Those would be my comments, and I'm looking forward to having debates with you. Sorry for the technical issues that we had previous to my intervention here. Thank you, Daniela, and all colleagues here at the table. Thank you.